name is Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
I hope I pronounce her name properly. Thais Gibson.
I am so excited for you to be here with me today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm a huge fan of your work. I can't say enough positive things about the work you're doing in the world, and I'm so excited to have this conversation.
I'm so thrilled to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to talk a little bit about autoimmunity, chronic illness. These are really important topics that I think there just isn't nearly enough mainstream information around. But before we do, will you just share a little bit about how you got into this world and why you're so passionate about the work that you do?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So my interest in nutrition was really born when I started to experience some health issues of my own. They were just niggling things, and I was trying to make adjustments. During that time when I got pregnant, which was a year after trying, so I call that period the other 9 months because there's a period of trying that may not result in what we want it to. My late husband was diagnosed with a brain tumor. So we were early in our pregnancy. I was just 7 weeks pregnant. All of a sudden, he got what the doctor thought was a sinus infection, gave him medication for a sinus infection, and a few things happened that made us realize this was bigger. He could barely move. He had a headache so badly. I called the ER doctor, and I actually called the on-call doctor, and they said, call ER, because it could be a neurological problem. That kind of went over my head at the time, but I can remember it in retrospect. We showed up in the ER. It took all night, but they were able to identify a mass in his head. Again, I'm 7 weeks pregnant. All of a sudden, he's diagnosed with what was ultimately a brain tumor. And that shifted all of my thinking and all of what we were going to do. We were all of a sudden in the medical system in a way we had never been in the system in our early 30s before. So that meant that I was starting to look at what are all the other things we could do in addition to the medical treatments he was going to endure. So for me, that is the period that I consider my boot camp in nutrition. I didn't know then what I know now. He was given about 6 months to live. He lived 2.5 years. So that just became a lifelong passion that I have for the impact that dietary and lifestyle modification can make on an individual's health outcomes.
Oh, well, it's such a beautiful and powerful story of how you took something really painful and turned it into something really amazing and now are impacting so many people's lives. But I can only imagine how challenging that would have been at this time, that, you know, being 7 weeks pregnant and just everything that you did. So huge testament to you, of course. And will you tell, anybody who's less familiar as well, just a little bit about the work you do now in the world so people have some context before we really dive into the topic?
Yeah, context is queen, right? We love that context. And I know there's a lot to unpack even in that story. So I'm a functional medicine nutritionist. That took many years after my husband passed to go through training to realize what was missing in healthcare, where there were gaps in functional medicine, in integrative medicine, and holistic medicine, and really wanting to fill those and give people more tools to work with. So ultimately, I built the Functional Nutrition Alliance, or what is now the Functional Nutrition Alliance, and had a different name at the time, and started to work with clients, but then had more and more practitioners asking me to train them. So I built a 10-month training program in the science and art of functional nutrition. And we now have trained over 8,000 practitioners in over 68 countries around the globe. Meanwhile, we still have a clinic, and my own personal work is also evolving to include both functional medicine and functional nutrition practices with the practices of narrative medicine. And if we need to break down functional medicine, we can do that too, because it might be like, I still don't know what she's saying.
We'll dive into autoimmunity in a moment, but I would love to hear, in your words, what functional medicine really is, because it's such a trending topic and it's gaining so much headway, which is amazing, as it should be. But for anybody who's not as familiar with that, will you explain it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what's termed functional medicine is kind of leaving the station in a way for both positive and negative effects. So if we look at the history of functional medicine, it was born in the 1990s, and it was born from the work of Dr. Jeffrey Bland, who really is a biochemist. He's a nutritional biochemist and a doctor. And so he really honored principles of systems biology. And to break down that term, we just mean that everything in the body is connected. The gut's connected to the brain, the hormones are connected to the liver, which is connected to the gut. Your inflammation's connected to your digestive system, understanding that everything in the body is connected. So I always like to say there are three primary tenets of a functional practice. Number one is a therapeutic partnership, meaning both people are equal, right? The practitioner is not the guide. They're not the God, they're the guide. And that each of us as patients have a lot of information to bring to the table that must be honored. So therapeutic partnership, tenet number one. Tenet number two is that we look for the root causes. And I want to highlight the S there because I think people get into trouble looking for the root cause. And we'll be talking more about root causes today with autoimmunity. But that just means we ask, why is this happening in this person's body, not just what do I do about it? So why, not what? And the third tenet is that systems-based approach. So both systems biology and, as you may know, taking a systematic approach that's looking at somebody as an individual and having the tools that help us to understand, wait, what's going on in their body and what's appropriate for them in this moment in time, as opposed to just a protocol that's one size fits all. So again, if it doesn't prescribe to those three tenets, honoring the therapeutic partnership, looking for the root causes, and embracing a systems-based approach, I'm going to say it's just not functional. So these approaches that are anchored on just doing a test and treating to a test, or supplement focused without understanding the why, that's not really functional, even though a lot of people are calling it that these days.
Wow, I love that explanation. And I think it honors that. It's so funny. I was just on a webinar before this for students talking about psychology and all these things. And I had somebody say, we were talking about communication and we were going through scripting and practicing it. And one person in the webinar said, how do I deal with my doctor because they're gaslighting my health issues and it's happening to me? And I just love principle number one. I see that all the time with our students who ask questions like this. And, you know, I love that tenet number one is that you're really taking the patient's information and it's not one person is sort of in a higher space than the other, the subordinate, but it's actually this team-based approach because we know our bodies as individuals so well and all that information is so important. So I love that. I just think that's a hugely important thing, especially right now. And I love all three parts, but the second part stood out to me as well, where we see every symptom as a feedback mechanism. It's not just in your words, what you do here, take this pill or try this medicine. It's, well, why is this happening? It's giving us some sort of feedback. So I love that. I love that explanation. Now, when we go into the idea of autoimmunity, for anybody who, first of all, may not even know what autoimmunity is, but secondly, may not even realize they're having symptoms of autoimmune conditions. What are some of those initial things that you would share with them about autoimmunity and how can we recognize different symptoms?
Yeah, and this relates to what you were really speaking about before with the gaslighting. So I kind of want to tie this together and really make it a fluid conversation in the role that we play as patients in our own healthcare. And that's a lot of where my next level of work is going, where I'm really saying, how does the patient become a partner? And this then goes to your question of how do we pay attention to what's going on? And we have to stop and listen. We have to slow down. We have to recognize when doing the standard thing isn't working for us anymore. And when I talked about my journey and really focusing on food before my husband's diagnosis, it's because those niggling signs and symptoms were happening for me. I have an autoimmune condition called Hashimoto's, which is fairly common these days. And things were starting that weren't going to get that label in my life for a very long time. So autoimmunity is when the immune system starts to turn on itself, auto, immunity. So your immune system in your body is meant to filter out what your body needs and what your body doesn't need. I don't love the word foreigner for this purpose. It's what's typically used in immune language. So something that's not supposed to be in our system is what your immune system is meant to address. And it has many layers that it uses to be able to support you. And when it becomes autoimmunity, the immune cells in your body, which are your white blood cells, have become confused and they start to attack not just you, but tissues in particular parts of your body that are then related to that diagnosis. So with Hashimoto's, the immune cells are attacking tissues in my thyroid because that's autoimmune thyroiditis. If we're looking at something like multiple sclerosis as an immune response, then we're looking at the attack on the nerves. If we're looking at Crohn's or colitis, we're looking at attacks of the tissues in the digestive system. So there are many, over 100 different autoimmune conditions, and the condition is diagnosed in a lot of different ways, depending on the diagnosis, but in relation to where the immune system has turned its attack, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So the way we tell that, to answer your question after all of that, is just by paying attention, tuning in, and recognizing where we're experiencing symptoms that would be related to inflammation. Yeah. Something's not getting better in some part of our body, and we're not having the same results that we were used to having before in our lives or that we see other people having. So it's just an awareness of, wait a minute, raise my hand, something's happening. And then in all honesty, it takes 3 or 4 years, 3 or 4 doctors before it's diagnosed, which is that period of gaslighting that you were talking about, where you're like, wait a minute, something's happening. This doesn't feel right. I don't know what's going on. And nobody's paying attention to you.
Yeah. And it's so tough for people. And I understand too, like the healthcare system's absolutely like overwhelmed. And there's so many features that play into that. But I just think that there's often, at least in our sort of traditional system, a lot of people are going through having a discussion. The doctor doesn't have time or an answer. So they kind of refer out, or hey, it's probably fine, or it might be mental or emotional. And it can be so tricky for people. But I think it's so important to really be having these discussions so that there's some awareness and there's a path forward for individuals. Now, you have in your course, you have this discussion where you talk about 3 roots, many branches. And I would love to explore that and how that relates here. So do you mind diving into that for a moment?
Absolutely. And we can make a good visual of it. And what I want to anchor on here is that even though it takes time to get a diagnosis, let's just be real that the diagnosis is not the be all end all. And there's a lot that we patients can do for ourselves while we're seeking that diagnosis, which is going to lead us back to the same things we have to do anyway. An autoimmune diagnosis, because it's a chronic health condition, it's not an acute condition, is not easily remedied by our healthcare system. So I just want to state that, because a lot of times people are like, if I could just get the diagnosis, my doctor is gaslighting me. Guess what? You're going to get the diagnosis. You're going to have to do the same thing anyway, because managing an autoimmune condition means you're tuned in a certain way. I'm sorry, and you're welcome. Like, it is an opportunity to really slow down and tune in. So that leads us to the 3 roots, many branches, which is where I like to direct people in their care while you're looking for your medical support. It's a yes and. So let's just imagine for a moment that we are in a field, in a beautiful field. It's springtime here in Oregon, and all the wildflowers are blooming. And let's say you go out to see these wildflowers in this beautiful field, and there's a gorgeous tree in the middle of that field. And it's this old tree that's just beautiful and blossoming. And you walk towards this tree because you're so in awe of it. And as you get closer, you recognize that some of the leaves on the tree, even though it's springtime, are turning brown and falling to the ground. And some of the bark on the branches is also turning, and it doesn't look as healthy as it can. And you're really moved because you want to support this tree in all of its magnificence. And so you start to think about what you can do. And you wonder, should I get a ladder and pick off all the leaves? Well, that's not going to get me very far. Should I get a ladder and a saw and saw off the branches that have some bark that doesn't look healthy? Well, that's not going to help this tree. What do I need to do? And so we think, wait a minute, to nourish this tree, we have to go deep to the roots, but we also have to go even deeper to where the roots live. And the roots live in soil. And that soil is going to help direct how we influence the different roots. So before we look at the roots and the soil, I just want to say those branches are every single sign, symptom, or diagnosis that you can name for yourself. So you and I could probably shout out the signs and symptoms and diagnoses that we hear people complaining about.
Or exhaustion or
bloating,
moodiness,
swollen eyes,
rashes. Yeah, all of the things.
Exactly. All of the things. Those are the branches. And we're often fixated on looking for a solution for the branches, but the branches are just an external expression of what needs love and support deeper down. So literally for anybody here, any sign, symptom, or diagnosis, write it down, recognize that it's a branch, and it may need some medical attention, but we have different ways in. One way in is sawing off the branch. Another way in is nourishing the soil so that you support those roots. So our 3 roots in my model that you mentioned are the genes, digestion, and inflammation. And if you can visualize that, I have that like a Venn diagram. So 3 different circles that are our roots. And each of those have soil that becomes what I like to call our circle of influence. And that terminology was borrowed from Stephen Covey, who wrote about the habits of the most successful people.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You said it better than I did. Yes. So that circle of influence is where we're not trying to control, which leads us to a state of anxiety. We recognize that we have some influence over these expressions. So I'll pause there and we can go into each as you feel necessary.
I love that. I just love the analogy, and I think it's so powerful. And I would love if we break down each of those pieces. And I think just to reiterate what you said for anybody listening, like to map out those symptoms, like to get in touch with your body. I think sometimes we get so externally focused, and I focus a lot on this with people from a mental, emotional perspective, that we get so externally focused that we don't realize our emotions are feedback. And these different aspects of our lives, when we're having difficulty, they're telling us something. And I think it's even more prominent from a physiological point of view. And so those things are communicating to us. And I think that's such a beautiful analogy. I just wanted to pop in here and let you know we are doing a 7-day free trial to the All Access Membership Pass at PDS, which means you get access to literally everything inside of the school. And this includes the 4 live webinars I do with our students every single week. And on top of that, you get access to all of our different courses. We have over 55 different courses on relationships, communication, boundaries, emotional mastery, guilt and shame, learning your needs, so many different facets that are really important to master our lives and feel really good about our lives going forward. And last but not least, there's a daily community event. We have trained facilitators and coaches who are in there doing that work, showing up to support you on your journey every single day. Please join me on the other side. Come check it out. See if it's a fit for you. I'd love to see you there. Go ahead and sign up by clicking the link in the description box below. So can we dive into each of the parts? So let's talk about genes for a moment for anybody who's like, where do I start with genes? What does this mean? What can you share?
Yeah. So a lot of times, or especially these days, we get fixated on knowing our genomics. People want genetic testing. They think that genetic testing is going to tell them the answer. That's very rarely the case. There are few genes, or they're even not genes, they're the genomic factors. So they're little tiny they're called single nucleotide polymorphisms, or little mutations that we all have hundreds of them. And people think that that's going to give them the protocol. So I'll just throw out some that are more common these days. People get focused on or fixated on MTHFR or COMT genes, right? They want to know, like, what's the treatment for the fact that I have this? Well, the fact that you have it doesn't mean it's expressed. Genes have to turn on or off, up or down. They have like a dimmer on them. And our epigenetic factors are what influence our genetic expression. So I say ignore the genomics. We don't need the testing unless you're way further along in trying to figure out what's going on in your body, and focus on the epigenetic factors, which are the soil. So when I say genes, I'm not saying go get your genes tested. I'm saying you have genes and your history, knowing what can you know about your history. I've worked with people who are adopted, people whose parents are no longer here. We can still draw from what we do know to say, what do I know about this history that I've inherited? Because our epigenetic factors start before our lifetime. They're ancestral, so they're passed down generation to generation. So the circle of influence is the food, movement, environment, and mindset, as you were talking about so beautifully. All of those factors are going to influence our genetic expression. So if we can focus on those areas, we start to influence that route. And people might say, food, you're a nutritionist, what do you mean? And I even break that down and have a circle of influence and say, think about quality, quantity, diversity, and timing as is appropriate for you in this moment in time.
I love that. I love that. And it's so powerful. And you're saying focus on what we can control, right? Like, and the epigenetic influence is so much more powerful nowadays in terms of looking at some of those things. So when we dive into each of those components that you mentioned, what are some places that if somebody's sitting and they're like, okay, I'm seeing that I may have autoimmune issues, or I'm not sure, I have the wilted branches or leaves, what can I begin diving into on a daily basis right now if I'm new to this work?
Yeah. So what I really like to focus on, and I have different systems that kind of work together, right? But I think of what you probably know as my non-negotiables. So there's another system that I call the 3 tiers to nutrition mastery. And it starts with tier 1, which are our non-negotiables. This is related to the 3 roots. It's going to fall in there, but it just gives us an easier place to start in our self-care. So our non-negotiables are the things that we know make us feel better or make us feel worse. So for you, for each of us, these in functional medicine, the fancy label is our mediators. We have mediators, but for us, what makes me feel better? What makes me feel worse in my life? What makes me feel better? What makes me feel worse? Makes me feel better to go to sleep by 10:30. It makes me feel better it could be that when I do drink coffee in the morning, or when I don't drink coffee in the morning, or when I meditate, whatever you know, that starts to be part of your non-negotiables. And then I also have a non-negotiable trifecta, which is going to help you know where to start. And that non-negotiable trifecta is sleep, poop, and blood sugar balance. So when it comes to sleep, I'm not ordering you to sleep. I'm saying, pay attention. What's happening? Do you notice any difference? Oh, I went to sleep at 10:30 and I notice I'm more tired the next day, or I wake up more. And when I go to sleep at 9:30, I actually sleep longer and more soundly. What do you learn just from paying attention that you then bring into your medical appointments with more knowledge? So the more you're tuned in and can self-represent, the better partner you are in that therapeutic partnership. Hey, doc, I noticed that.
I love that. I think that's so powerful. And you're sharing those pieces of information. Now, at what point would it be, like, let's say sleep. So I was having a conversation with somebody like 2 days ago, interestingly enough, a family member, and they were saying, oh, I'm a deep sleeper in the morning, but I'm a light sleeper at night. At what point is that maybe a symptom versus that's a pattern? We should just sleep in the morning, not really go to bed early. Like, where do we draw that line there for people who are listening in?
Yeah, what I hear when you tell me that is that somebody's already put a label on what it is that they're experiencing. And so they're saying, I am and there's like an identification with a pattern. Whereas I just want to step back and get curious, like just ask a lot of questions. Am I a light sleeper all the time? When was the first time I noticed being a light sleeper? And I call this like micro timelining. Like start to look when people say like, I've never slept well. And I'm say to them, what does that mean for you? What does sleeping well look like? What does sleep look like now? What's happening? Are you falling asleep okay? Do you wake up in the middle of the night? What time are you going to sleep? What's your sleep environment? All of the questions that help us to see, you know what? When I pay attention, I actually notice that. And there's likely something there that happens. So I would just ask us to come out of the implicit bias and attachment.
I love that. I love that. That's actually, it's so simple, but it's such amazing feedback because we can get so stuck in like, I am this way, or I can't eat these foods ever. I can only eat this, but it's like, well, why? We're still missing that sort of feedback loop and what else is going on there. So very, very powerful. Can we go back for a moment to the digestion and inflammation? So can we talk about that stuff for somebody who's like, okay, my digestion's off or I'm having inflammation? Like where would we start with digestion?
Yeah. And, I talked about the non-negotiable trifecta, sleep, poop, and blood sugar balance. Poop's going to be key here because it tells us a lot about how our digestion is working. And I will always say, if anybody's talking to you about nutrition without talking about digestion, we've missed the point. It's no longer functional. It's not functional because that's where food meets physiology is in the digestive tract. So the circle of influence around the root of digestion is the mechanical, the chemical, the structural, and the microbial. And people want to bypass to the microbial. It's very sexy to look at the microbiome. We want to feed our can we take microbiome? But there's a lot of other things that actually feed our microbiome and that help us to break down and utilize our food. So that mechanical piece starts with chewing. And everything I'm talking about seems so simple, but I'm going to call it the simplicity on the other side of complexity because I understand the physiological function of the body. And still, we got to talk about chewing because if we don't talk about chewing, we can talk about like the quote unquote best diet and dietary techniques. But if you're not chewing, it's going to have a miss. Let's just take, for instance, the rage right now is high protein diets. There's a lot of reasons that could not work for somebody and why that's a theory and not a practice or a reality in your own body. But our proteins really need to be broken down in some key areas. First of all, with chewing, but we have nothing to break down the chemical aspects of proteins in our mouths. That all comes in our stomach. And our stomach acid is where the chemical piece comes in. And it has to be very, very acidic in our stomach environment to break down complex protein structures. That acidity changes as we age and as we have autoimmune conditions like thyroid issues. So we are not breaking down those foods as well, which may cause problems further down in digestion and in how we're able to utilize the nutrients. So that's a really good example of where a dietary theory, like we should all eat more protein and eat this many grams, doesn't make sense from a functional perspective in every single body.
I love that. That's such a great example. And it's so funny because there's so much information on the internet. It's like, oh, everybody should be eating this way. Everybody should be doing this thing. And it's like, well, that's not how it works. It's not so simple.
Yes.
So what might be chewing, it's funny because I took your wonderful, wonderful course and it's so amazing and so comprehensive. But I remember reading or going through it and listening, and the first part was really about chewing. That was one of the earliest things that was discussed. I remember thinking like, this is so overlooked. But we live in a society where everybody's on the run, on the go. Like for me, like I often I could work on not eating And it's so easy to overlook, but you talk about how we can't really break things down properly, and it just has this sort of chain reaction of events. So what would you recommend for chewing? And then what would you also notice? Because I want to really break down each point for listeners about the stomach acid and
Right.
what are some symptoms of having low stomach acid. So what do you see there?
Yeah. So there's, it's some of the challenges with identifying symptoms with certain conditions or labels is that they can be so fast because they're so individualized. But like you're saying, the chewing is so critical. We all need a reminder all the time, which is kind of cool because it can be that simple. Oh, I notice if I chew more, I'm actually able to break things down more. And I'm not talking about counting. I'm not talking about being hyper obsessive. It's just bringing a little awareness. Like, what if one meal a day for a week, you thought about chewing and saw what difference it makes? And you did it. Like, we've lost the scientific method in healthcare and in nutrition. The scientific method is proving yourself wrong, not right. And we want to always prove ourselves right. But like, what if you did little experiments with yourself and you thought like, you know what, I'm going to sit down for breakfast, or I'm sitting down and turning my computer off for lunch. It's just a half hour. I can do it. And I'm going to focus on chewing and relaxing during my meal. How does that impact my afternoon? Like, just do little experiments with yourself, because all these things do matter. As you know, my mantra is everything is connected. We are all unique and all things matter. And those things are chewing, sleeping, pooping, hydrating. Those things actually matter. So with chewing, my invitation is just give it a try. Like, see what inspires you after hearing this to think about applying some more parasympathetic rest and digest tactics to one meal a day or even for a week.
And gather the feedback that's there.
I
love that. I think that's fantastic. And then as we move down and we move into the stomach and stomach acid, what would you, because I think a lot of people are not even familiar with that idea. Like,
yes.
What are some symptoms you would see of somebody who has low stomach acid so they can recognize that for themselves?
Yeah. So if we move down, so scientifically or biologically in the mouth, we produce the enzymes that break down our carbohydrates and that start to break down our fats. So that's what's happening when we're chewing. We're producing a chemical reaction to cleave some of those molecules that are in the food that we're eating so that they can get to the cells later on, which happens through the small intestine. When we get from the mouth, we go down the esophagus, everything gets squozen. We get to the stomach, which is higher up than people realize, like in the chest. And having low stomach acid can feel obvious, like reflux or, it's called hypochlorhydria when we have low stomach acid or stomach acid that is not the appropriate pH. So the pH should be very low. And it's often higher, but when we talk about it as low stomach acid, we mean that the stomach acid isn't where it needs to be to break down the proteins. So that stomach acid is what helps us to break down our proteins, like I was talking about. It's very, very acidic. So a pH of about 1, which is not true anywhere else in the body. And it should have doors that are called sphincters on either side that keep that acidity in. So when the stomach acid gets into a higher pH, those doors get sort of loose and we start to feel the reflux, the acid reflux that makes us think that we have too much stomach acid, when in fact we don't have enough stomach acid or a low enough pH stomach acid to break things down. So we oftentimes will feel like we're having acid reflux for the wrong reason. And so then we look to really alter our stomach acid in the wrong direction because of that acid reflux. So that's one symptom to answer your question. We could have heartburn, acid reflux, any of that could happen. GERD, it could happen when we lay down at night, that we feel like there's stuff in our chest. We could have chest pain, but we're also going to experience symptoms related to nutrient deficiency because we're not breaking down the nutrients we're taking in to be able to utilize them. So we use our amino acids for our immune system, for our brain, for our nervous system, and then we may feel like we're not taking in enough because we're actually just not breaking down enough.
And it's so funny because we live in this world where it's like, oh, I have acid reflux. I should take a
Totally.
or
Yes,
Tums.
exactly.
And it's like, but again, your body's actually communicating something so powerful to you.
Yes.
Now, when we get into the further parts of digestion, if we kind of dive all the way to the gut quickly, there's so many amazing things. I could talk to you for hours, but I want to make sure we get through the digestion and then the inflammation part. So for digestion specifically, what might be some really impactful things that people can first notice and then do?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're talking about them, right? Like we have to start upper digestion, but also notice what lower digestion issues you may be having. So this helps us to define those mediators. Do I feel bloating or gas, or is there a change in my elimination? And again, I don't want people to be like obsessive about this. It's just curiosity. So do I notice that if I eat dairy, or if I eat at this time of day, or if I eat too late, that there are symptoms associated? You then start to redefine your patterns for your body's needs, and you've paid attention to come to that recommendation. You didn't get it from a social media scroll, you got it from tuning into your own body, right? So there can be lots of issues related to the small intestine, the integrity of the small intestine. This is often called leaky gut or gut hyperpermeability, where the tight gap junctions that keep our food, or the breakdown of our food, from getting into our bloodstream is kept in check. When those tight gap junctions get a little looser, we get molecules into our bloodstream that then become unknown, that inform that immune response, lead to inflammation, and can contribute to the autoimmune terrain. So the tight gap junctions in our gut, from a structural, remember that was one of our areas, from a structural perspective, are very important. And this is where we do need to support our microbiome. And there are so many ways we do that without just taking a probiotic. I love probiotics, but we also have our prebiotic foods. We have our fibers, we have our polyphenols that we get from foods like green tea and blueberries. We have our resistant starches, which resist digestion. We can get those from cooked cold potatoes and plantains. There's lots of ways that we feed the microbiome, and sleep and exercise also feed the microbiome. So there's so many things that when we look more broadly, we can do that aren't just that targeted, oh, I have leaky gut, quote unquote. I've done a leaky gut protocol. It's fine now. It's like a pregnant belly. It's going to go into directions all the time. It's kind of an all the time thing. And people used to eat in ways that fed their microbiome much more than they do today.
Which is probably part of why so many people are struggling with this.
Yes.
Because I think, to your point, and I learned this from a lot of your work, it's like, it's not just that we have to feed our microbiome and take care of it, but at the same time, there's a lot of things that can be actively destructive to our microbiome that we're just flooding our bodies with all the time and not even necessarily realizing. Do you mind speaking to that side of it as well for a moment?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of factors that are going to impact our microbiome, particularly pharmaceuticals and NSAIDs. They're definitely, so the ibuprofen, the Motrin, all of those on a regular basis. And I don't want people to be scared of antibiotics or whatever it is. There's a time and a place for it all. We just have to recognize that anything that goes into the body isn't without reaction. And so when we recognize that, whether it's an antibiotic, an antifungal or antiviral, whether it's other pharmaceuticals that we're taking, even birth control pills, anything has an effect, as does your green smoothie and your kale salad. So it's just the recognition that, oh, I'm doing this. Is there something I can do to support my body to come back into balance? And in today's day and age, we're not eating the foods that serve our microbiome, and people are on a plethora of pharmacologics that are impacting that same terrain.
Yep, 100%. And what do you think about the term? I'm curious. I hear there's like a lot of work around lectins and cutting out lectins, and lectins are evil. And then there's people who I see have very healthy guts who like actively eat tomatoes and cucumbers and all sorts of things. What's your stance on that out of curiosity?
Yeah, so I am a proponent of eating the most diverse or the broadest diet we can eat for any one period of time. So that means there may be a time and a place for an elimination protocol, which is not meant to be done long term. So when people are vilifying natural chemicals that exist in whole foods, I think we've lost our way. The idea is that the body should be able to receive and break down those foods, and we've lost our ability to do so. And that's fine. If you can't tolerate something like a lectin, first of all, notice that you can't tolerate it instead of reading that you're not supposed to eat lectins or nightshades or grains or whatever it is that's in vogue. It'll change in 30 days what's in vogue. I mean, I was just thinking about the protein thing this morning. I was like, protein is so in vogue right now. What happened to fat? Like, fat used to be so in vogue as like how we were eating. Everybody wanted to eat keto. And now it's like high protein. And we have to recognize these are just trends. And they do give us some insights into the importance of these things, but we want to go broad. So again, quality, quantity, diversity, and timing. So we can talk about my 3 principles for eating as opposed to rules. But when we get to things like lectins or people eating a low histamine diet, there's a time and a place. I'm not saying like low FODMAP. There are reasons to do that for a short period of time, but those limited diets will also lead to nutrient deficiencies because of what they're leaving out. And those nutrient deficiencies can lead to other signs and symptoms that we don't have a place to attribute them to. So people start to limit. That's what we see in our clinic. People who come in like eating 3 foods, and they didn't do the internal work to be able to receive more food and process it. They only eliminated food.
It's so powerful what you're saying. I just love the way you've broken it down, because it really goes back to the principles that we started with in the conversation that said, you have to listen to your body. Like,
Yes.
it's going to be one thing for one person. And then it goes back to the second thing, which was don't attach, right? I cannot eat these foods.
Right.
It's more like, okay, I'm going to take a break from these foods, see how I feel, tune into my body. Then I can revisit. And if I'm still having issues, well, maybe I need to not attach to the concept of I can't eat these foods, and instead investigate further why that might be happening. So I really see your framework running through this whole conversation, which is really beautiful to witness. Now, if somebody goes through something like this, and let's say they are having food sensitivities and they do take a break and they do have an alleviation of symptoms, what would you then recommend doing next to potentially, strengthen and support the gut as a whole?
Yeah, so I think this is where we might need help, right? Like, this is where having somebody who understands how to support you in tracking and knowing what's going on can be really helpful. If you're noticing, so first of all, when we talk about food sensitivities, this comes back to the immune system, and food sensitivities are different than allergies, and those are different than intolerances. So I just want to make sure we're aware that an allergy is an immediate response. A sensitivity is where we might have a delayed response, but it's kind of more insidious, leading to more of those signs and symptoms we can't resolve. And an intolerance is where the actual digestive system can't process it for some reason. So allergy and sensitivity are related to the immune system, and an intolerance is typically related to the digestive system. So tuning in and recognizing what are you feeling, but the sensitivities could be felt in any which way. And I worry that people are identifying their sensitivities based on a piece of paper or a test, an at-home test, and then saying and over-identifying, like we're talking about, I have this sensitivity. That may be an issue within your digestive system that needs fortifying. So again, building that microbiome, building that ability to keep what's supposed to stay in the digestive system and move out through your poop, in that hole in our body and letting what needs to get into the bloodstream get into the bloodstream. So there could be other ways of looking at a sensitivity that aren't just about food removal or restriction. So want to speak to that piece. And then I think what we do is we tune in and we say, I'm removing these foods that I can feel don't make me feel good. And is it too limited? Is it so limited that I need help? Or, yeah, I'm fine. I don't need to eat bananas. Like, got it. Like, I'm okay. Right. Like, so those are different scenarios. I do not eat gluten. There was a time where and I don't eat refined sugar. There was a time where there were other foods that I would not eat and didn't eat for years. And now I can eat them on occasion. Like, I do eat goat and sheep dairy and I do eat eggs, but there were times where I couldn't eat those at all. And now I can feel my body's rhythm a little bit where I know what's too much, where can I have a little allowance? And that's ultimately living. That's where we want to be. But it takes internal healing and awareness to get to that place.
I love that. And I think it's so powerful. And if we had to say a couple things in there for anybody listening, would you say, you mentioned a few different ways of eating and potentially an elimination diet, but then would you say at that point, do your probiotics, prebiotics, digestive enzymes? Like what else would you sort of throw into the mix as suggestions there? And to your point, maybe it's good to have somebody support you on that journey at that point as well. But just at a high level, what would you recommend for anybody listening?
Yeah, I like to think of food principles, like I was mentioning, that help us all to have a place to start. Because, as a functional medicine nutritionist, I'm very careful about giving recommendations that are very specific in a global way. So the principles helped me to say, like, where do we start without saying, like, well, you should eat this, you shouldn't eat that. So here we go. Principle number 1 is fat, fiber, protein at every meal. So fat, fiber, protein, every meal or snack. How do you think through that? And if you don't know, what does she mean by fat or what does she mean by protein? That's where you can do your research and you're looking, like spend your time there. So if I eat an apple, I'm getting my fiber, but I'm not getting fat or protein. If I eat my apple with some almond butter, I just added fat and protein to my fiber, right? So that's just a good example of if I'm eating a salad or if I'm just eating a steak, how do I want to make sure that I'm adding some fiber to that meal, right? Like how do I make sure fat, fiber, protein, and just run through it every time you're eating a meal or a snack. So that's principle number 1. Principle number 2 is eat the rainbow. And this goes back to both fiber and our diversity. So the rainbow is reminding us to eat more whole foods that come from the earth, that are different colors, that give us a lot of different nutrients. We get a lot of different micronutrients from the plant foods. And if we get really playful, we can start to say, oh my gosh, I'm never eating any red. Or in the summer, I eat a lot of red when I'm getting like strawberries and raspberries and tomatoes. But otherwise, like, where does my red come from? And you go to the store and say, you know what, I'm buying red potatoes today instead of the yellow ones. So you just get super playful. Look at your grocery cart, look at your meal through the day. If you have children, it's a really fun way to play with what colors did we get today. Really playful, eat the rainbow. And principle number 3 is know your yes, no, maybe list. And this kind of brings us full circle back to those mediators, what works for me and what doesn't. And so I will experience 2 things. Either people are like, I never feel well, but food doesn't make a difference. That's a little, missing the mark. Or everything I eat makes me feel sick. And so we have to recognize that different people need different things at different times, but knowing this is what I know makes me feel good, what makes me feel bad is our starting place for a conversation. So yes, love it, makes me feel great. No, I don't feel well when I eat this. Maybe, I'm not sure. When I drink wine in these occasions, it feels okay. But when I do it in these occasions, it doesn't. Like, start tuning in And that's your ticket to be able to self-advocate.
And it's so interesting because health is such an important part of our lives. And you look at all these places that we tune in and we check ourselves and we try to improve in like our career or with our budget, or, you know, you can go through these different areas of life. And it's like, why would we not do that with one of the most important parts of how we're ever going to be effective, which is our body? So I think that, you know, the huge theme I see is like you advocating, get in relationship to self, get in relationship to symptoms, feedback, food, make it like an actual intentional process and check back so that we're really building that relationship. And I had so many conversations with people over the years, just briefly, who have said things like, should I eat keto? Should I be a vegetarian, a vegan?
Exactly.
Should I be, you know, high protein, you know, and it's like, well, that's a decision you're going to find out by actually paying attention and listening and following a lot of these tenets that you're here to
And why? Like that's when because I get it all the time. Should I be eating like this, or should I take this supplement that's like all of a sudden all over Instagram, right? And I'm like, why do you want to take that supplement, or why do you want to follow? Like, what is your goal in doing that? Really asking people makes them have to check in. And what I'll usually get back in relation to a supplement, should I take this supplement, is why they'll give me like the bullet points that the supplement company says, like helps with neurological, helps with inflammation, helps. And I'm like, but you're already doing X, Y, like why do you need that? You are already filling that need with something else you're doing. So understanding our whys, and to your point, so beautifully stated about where we pay attention in our lives. I always like to say, we like to personalize everything, our Spotify accounts, our jeans, our bed softness with the sleep number, like everything is personalized except our health. We're like farming out our health advocacy to influencers, as opposed to looking at our own ability to influence our own health. And I find it shocking too, because we are so adamant in so many parts of our lives about how individual we are, except when it comes to our health.
I agree with that. I think that's such a powerful, powerful share. So this has been one of my favorite conversations I've had. I feel like we could talk for hours, and you're a wealth of knowledge. Where can people really learn more about you, the work you're doing, get in touch with you, and all of the powerful course materials, everything that you have?
Well, thank you for the conversation and for that note and invitation. So AndreaNakayama.com is my website, and I can be found at Andrea Nakayama on all the socials. And that website will lead you to the writing that I'm doing now that's more patient-oriented, related to how do we dive into this realm of self-knowledge. And it'll also lead you back to the practitioner training at the Functional Nutrition Alliance, which is the business I founded and the Full Body Systems curriculum.
Beautiful. And that's such a great curriculum to dive into if somebody wants to just go deeper into their understanding, and it really breaks everything down. Like I feel like there's no stone left unturned there. And it really is about how all of our body systems are connected, how they work. It's really amazing stuff. So thank you so much for joining me here. I really appreciated this conversation. I know our listeners will love it. And hopefully one day in the future, you'll come back.
Yes, thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Share it with friends and family who are on their journey of personal development and growth. And thank you for listening. Next week, we'll be back with more insights to guide you on your journey. And until then, keep practicing our tools and strategies to change your subconscious mind and apply some of the powerful learnings from this podcast so that you experience real life transformation.